4 years, fans asked the same question. Why did Ed China really leave Wheeler Dealers? The official story felt too neat, too polished, no drama, just creative differences. But something didn't add up. The chemistry was perfect, the show was thriving, and then suddenly he was gone. Now, after 8 long years, Ed China has finally confirmed why he left Wheeler Dealers. In a recent quietly dropped interview, he revealed what many suspected all along, and it's deeper than anyone imagined. The golden age of Wheeler Dealers. When Wheeler Dealers quietly premiered in 2003, nobody expected it to become a global phenomenon. It wasn't flashy. It didn't shout for attention. It didn't need to. It was just two blokes, one buying beat-up cars, and the other bringing them back to life in a modest little workshop with squeaky floor tiles and tools older than some of the cars themselves. Mike Brewer, the ever-enthusiastic wheeler and dealer, and Ed China, the towering, soft-spoken engineering wizard, made an unlikely but instantly endearing duo. The early format was refreshingly simple. Mike would scout for affordable used cars that had potential, diamonds in the rough, and Ed would work his magic in the garage, taking viewers step by step through every nut, bolt, gasket, and patch panel. There were no sweeping drone shots or dramatic music swells, no sponsored plugs or gratuitous slow-motion shots of tire smoke. Just honest mechanics and even more honest storytelling. The show didn't try to be slick, and that's exactly why it worked. In the early years, the show was made with a skeleton crew: Mike, Ed, a cameraman, a sound guy, and a couple of producers from Attaboy TV. It was raw. It was pure. There were no guarantees it would even get picked up again after the first season. But it did, and not just picked up, propelled. What started as a low-budget British car show would eventually become a juggernaut, airing in over 200 territories and pulling in hundreds of millions of viewers. But with success comes scale, and with scale come friction. As the show's footprint expanded, so did the expectations. Behind the curtain, decisions were being made, bigger ones, commercial ones. And slowly, the story began to shift, not just on screen, but behind the scenes too. Building a brand without the gloss. Part of what made Wheeler Dealers so unique in the early 20noughties was what it refused to do. In a TV landscape increasingly saturated with glossy, sponsor-driven content, Ed and Mike built a brand that almost defiantly rejected product placements, flashy gimmicks, or overly dramatized edits. There were no brought-to-you-by interruptions, no staged conflicts for the sake of a storyline. Just real cars, real problems, and real solutions. Ed once remarked in an interview that Wheeler Dealers was always about getting your hands dirty and showing people how it's actually done, not about glamorizing the process. That rawness became its superpower. Viewers weren't just watching for the before and after reveals. They stuck around for the middle, the grease-covered, often painstaking bits that most other shows edited out. In industry circles, Wheeler Dealers was something of a unicorn. It succeeded not because of branding, but in spite of the lack of it. As one fan blog put it, they treated the audience like mechanics, not consumers. There was an almost old-school BBC-style educational charm to it, and fans appreciated that trust. This approach gave the show authenticity, something you can't fake with clever editing or budget. But while audiences embraced the no-gloss format, it didn't exactly thrill network executives with dollar signs in their eyes, especially not in America, where content is often seen through the lens of monetization first, storytelling second. As the show gained traction across the Atlantic and began pulling serious numbers internationally, Discovery saw an opportunity. Wheeler Dealers wasn't just a car show anymore, it was a brand. And brands, to them, had to be polished, structured, and marketable. The idea of leaving sponsor money on the table became harder and harder to ignore. That was the turning point. Discovery and its U.S. arm, the Lusty Channel, didn't just want a successful show, they wanted a TV product. Something sleek, something scalable, something Americanized. And that's exactly when the slow, subtle fracture in creative vision began to form. Fame, friction, and format stress. By the time Wheeler Dealers reached its 7th season, it wasn't just a popular show, it was a global franchise. With every new market came new expectations, more cars, tighter schedules, quicker turnarounds, and an increasing number of people weighing in on what the show should be. The format was still recognizable, but it was stretching. The episodes had to fit new time slots in different territories. The cuts became tighter, the explanations shorter. Viewers started noticing that Ed's technical segments, once the meat of the show, were shrinking bit by bit. Behind the scenes, Ed and Mike were also dealing with the logistical chaos that comes with international success. Deadlines got more brutal. Shooting schedules became relentless. Vehicles had to be sourced, fixed, filmed, and flipped faster than ever before. There were signs, small ones but noticeable. Ed's explanations of certain repairs felt rushed. Whole procedures were suddenly done off-camera. Technical deep dives gave way to time-lapse montages. For longtime fans, the change was jarring. The soul of the show, the part where you actually learn something, was being squeezed. Reddit threads, car forums, and YouTube comment sections lit up with speculation. Why doesn't Ed explain the repairs like he used to? Did anyone else notice his barely in the last few episodes? Are they trying to Americanize the show? Many viewers assumed it was just a natural evolution or that Ed was possibly scaling back due to time constraints. Few suspected the real answer, that he was quietly pushing back behind the scenes, advocating for the integrity of the workshop segments. He wasn't ready to give up the soul of the show without a fight. But in the cutthroat world of television production, creative pushback often runs headfirst into budget constraints, network priorities, and audience data analytics. Ed was fighting a battle that was sadly already lost behind closed doors. Still, he didn't quit, not immediately. He tried to adapt. He tried to make it work. And for a while, he succeeded in keeping the essence alive, even if only in fragments. But the cracks had formed. Although no public disagreements were aired at the time, the signs were there. Mike, always a showman, began front-loading more of the screen time. Ed China was starting to feel like a passenger on a ship he once helped build, and the destination? Somewhere slicker, somewhere faster, somewhere that didn't have time for talkspecs and threadlock. The velocity takeover, a fork in the road. Then came the corporate shift that changed everything. After 12 solid seasons, Discovery made a pivotal business move. Production of Wheeler Dealers would no longer be handled by Attaboy TV, the UK-based company that birthed the show. Instead, Discovery handed the reins over to its US subsidiary, Velocity Channel. Out went the cozy British workshop and collaborative production style. In came Discovery Studios in California, and a mandate to modernize the format. To Discovery XX, this was a logical evolution. The show had global momentum, a solid fan base, and clear monetization potential. But to the core creative team, especially Ed, this felt like a hostile takeover of the show's DNA. Ed addressed this transition candidly in his farewell video. He revealed that Velocity found the original format too difficult to produce, particularly the detailed and in-depth coverage of the fixes that had defined the show. The new U.S. producers wanted tighter episodes, with quicker segments and broader appeal. In plain terms, less time under the hood, more time on the surface. Ed was asked to simplify, to cut corners, to reduce his segment to something closer to mechanical sound bites than actual repairs. It was a slow but definitive erosion of the show's foundation. For him, mechanical transparency wasn't just a segment, it was the heart of the show. Once that was up for compromise, he knew it was a fork in the road, and the path he chose would take him far away from the brand he helped build. Behind the scenes, a battle over the show's soul. Long before cameras stopped rolling and goodbye videos hit the internet, a quiet war was already being waged behind the scenes of Wheeler Dealers. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It was about something far more personal, creative integrity. At the heart of this battle stood Ed China, a man who didn't just repair cars. He taught people how to think like mechanics. Every fix he performed wasn't just a repair job. It was a mini masterclass in engineering, delivered with patience, precision, and a surprising dose of wit. Ed's segments weren't filler. They were the spine of the show. But as Velocity's influence grew, so did their appetite for speed and polish. Their vision leaned toward entertainment first. Flashy edits, snappy transitions, and shorter attention spans catered to. In their eyes, a 15-minute carburetor to rebuild was dead weight. Why show someone how to fix a gearbox when you can just cut to the before and after with upbeat music and a few one-liners? Ed saw things differently. He believed the viewer deserved a why behind every how. That was the core of his philosophy, And he knew that once those lessons were stripped away, what remained wasn't Wheeler Dealers. It was just another car-flipping show. In his now famous 2017 farewell video, Ed didn't mince words. He calmly but firmly stated that the new production setup wanted to reduce the Wake Shop segment content significantly, and in doing so, force him into a corner. He said, "That's not something I'm particularly comfortable with. I could have carried on doing the show, of course, but then I wouldn't be doing it properly. I'd be bodging it." And bodging it wasn't an option. Ed made it clear he was being asked to cut corners, to condense or eliminate the very parts of the show that required the most time and care. And while that might have saved money and fit tighter runtimes, it would have come at the cost of the show's integrity, and his own. This was no longer just a workplace disagreement. It was a creative divorce. On one side, the network chasing viewership metrics and scalability. On the other, a craftsman fighting to protect what made the show meaningful in the first place. He could have stayed quiet. He could have taken the money and smiled through it. But Ed China chose something else. He chose a hard road, the honest road. And in doing so, he walked away, not from the spotlight, but from a compromised version of what he helped build. The official breakup. March 21st, 2017. No flashy press release. No network statement. Just a simple YouTube video under 10 minutes long, recorded in Ed China's garage, with that familiar, easy demeanor we'd all come to know. But make no mistake, this was a bombshell. In the video, Ed calmly announced his departure from Wheeler Dealers. He didn't rage. He didn't throw anyone under the bus. His tone was measured, almost heartbreakingly polite. But between the lines, the weight was clear. He was being forced to choose between his values and his paycheck. And he chose his values. He laid it out in classic Ed fashion, technical, thoughtful, and with zero unnecessary drama. He spoke of how the US-based producers found it too difficult to film his detailed repairs, how the workshop content was to be significantly reduced, and how that decision compromised the spirit of the show. "That just wouldn't be fair to you guys," he said, looking straight into the camera. But what really stood out wasn't what Ed said. It was what he didn't. He didn't name names. He didn't blame Mike. He didn't trash the network. He didn't call it a betrayal, even if many fans interpreted it that way. Instead, he framed it as a decision born from principle, quiet, dignified, and firm. This felt more like a professional excuse for separation rather than what had really happened. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The video racked up millions of views in a matter of days. Comments poured in, thousands of them. Fans were heartbroken, confused, and angry. Some felt like they'd lost a friend. Others felt like they'd been tricked by the show's sudden shift in tone. What united them all was this: they believed Ed. And while the video gave fans closure, it also opened the floodgates of speculation, blame, and backlash. Fallout and fan backlash. The fan reaction was swift, emotional, and brutally divided. While many mourned Ed's departure, others wanted someone to blame. And unfortunately, a good chunk of that blame landed squarely on the shoulders of Mike Brewer. For years, Mike had been the charismatic frontman of Wheeler Dealers. He found the deals, talked the talk, and kept the energy up. But in the wake of Ed's exit, fans began to question his role in the breakup. Was he complicit in the creative changes? Did he back the new production direction? Could he have fought harder to keep Ed on board? Social media turned volatile. Brewer's Twitter feed became a battlefield. Some accused him of selling out. Others outright attacked him, sending hate mail and even threats. The tone was ugly and deeply personal. Mike, blindsided by the intensity of the backlash, posted a few public responses. He insisted he had no role in forcing Ed out. In fact, he claimed he was gutted by Ed's decision, stating that they'd built something special and that Ed was like a brother to him. He said the format shift wasn't his doing. It was the network's. Ed, to his credit, tried to douse the flames. In a follow-up message, he explicitly asked fans not to blame or harass Mike. He said it was a network issue, not a personal feud. But by then, the narrative had taken on a life of its own. Even mainstream media picked up on the tension. Headlines like Wheeler Dealers in turmoil and fans revolt over Ed China's exit dominated automotive news cycles. Reddit threads dissected every word of Ed's farewell. YouTube was flooded with reaction videos, conspiracy theories, and editorials. The new version of the show, now co-hosted by an Instead, continued, but it wasn't the same. Viewer sentiment was fractured. Some stayed loyal to the brand. Others followed Ed to whatever he would do next. And in the middle of all this chaos was a silent truth. Something intangible had been lost. Not just a presenter, but the trust that made the show beloved in the first place. The rumor drift. Did Ed and Mike fall out? Even after the dust settled, one question never really went away. Did Ed and Mike fall out behind the scenes? Both of them, time and again, have publicly denied it. In interviews and social posts, they've insisted there was no personal feud, no blowout, no betrayal, just a difference of vision, one that couldn't be reconciled. And maybe that's true, but fans couldn't help noticing the gaps. Since 2017, the two men have had zero public collaborations, no surprise podcast reunions, no friendly Instagram banter, no car show panels side by side. In an industry where even bitter ex-collaborators occasionally reunite for PR or nostalgia, their total silence together has been conspicuous. People aren't wrong to wonder. After all, this wasn't just a working relationship, it was a TV partnership that spanned 13 years. If it really ended amicably, why the cold freeze? Some fans point to interviews where Mike's language seemed offensive. Others note how Ed's tone has grown more diplomatic, more cautious when asked about Mike directly. It's not what's being said, it's what's not being said. The long pauses, the careful wording, the respectful but distant phrasing. It's enough to make you think. Maybe there wasn't a dramatic falling out, but maybe there was a growing emotional and creative distance. The kind that doesn't explode in arguments, but simmers in silence. Whatever the case, the lack of reconciliation became part of the story, an open-ended chapter that left fans guessing. And that's what made what happened next, 8 years later, so powerful. Because finally, after all the speculation, Ed China spoke. And this time, he didn't just walk away quietly. The confirmation, Ed finally speaks after 8 years. It took 8 years of silence, speculation, and fan theories before Ed China finally opened up about the real reason for his departure from the show. Not in a dramatic expose or scathing tell-all, but in the most Ed way possible, calmly, precisely, and without any theatrics. In a recent podcast appearance, Ed reflected on the arc of Wheeler Dealers, and for the first time, clearly confirmed why he left. There was no coded language or corporate niceties, just a man finally speaking his truth. He talked about what it meant to build something from scratch, to take a shoestring show with a few lights and a couple of rusty classics and turn it into a global juggernaut. But then came the admission he hadn't wanted to leave. Not really. What drove him away wasn't a clash of egos or desire for change. It was a slow, creeping realization that the show he once loved had changed into something he could no longer stand behind. The most haunting part, he confessed to disliking the version of himself he had become during those final seasons. "I truly hated him," he said in a heavy voice. "He was someone I didn't recognize anymore. Not because of fame or burnout, but because he was being pushed to cut corners, gloss over the gritty stuff, and become something smoother, faster, easier to digest." He still didn't call anyone out specifically. He didn't need to. The message was crystal clear. The production no longer saw Wheeler Dealers as a hands-on educational series. They saw it as a content engine, and Ed was expected to fall in line. That's when it clicked. It wasn't about adapting. It was about compromising. And that, for Ed China, was a line in the sand. The podcast clip caught fire online. Fans who had followed the saga from the beginning finally had closure, not a cryptic goodbye, but a direct confirmation of what they'd always suspected. It was never just creative differences. It was a matter of principle and character. The debates roared back to life. Forums reignited. New fans discovered the story, and old fans finally felt vindicated. Because after all this time, Ed China had finally said it. He didn't walk away because he wanted to. He walked away because he had to. Reinvention. What Ed did next, leaving Wheeler Dealers, could have been the end of Ed China's on-screen career. For many, it would have been. After all, how do you follow up on a legacy that massive? But Ed didn't fade. He shifted gears. Shortly after his departure, he launched his own YouTube series, Workshop Diaries. Gone were the production lights, the time constraints, and the over-polished edits. What remained was the heart of what he loved, pure mechanics. The show was slow, methodical, and deeply technical. Some episodes delve into seemingly mundane tasks, fixing brake calipers, rebuilding transmissions, tweaking suspension geometry. But that was the point. It wasn't about flash, it was about craft. It didn't draw in millions overnight, and it didn't need to. The audience that mattered, the ones who loved Wheeler Dealers for its authenticity, followed him there. They embraced the long run times, the quiet pacing, the focus on doing things right instead of fast. Outside the screen, Ed kept busy. He popped up at auto expos, delivered talks at engineering summits, and kept tinkering with oddball inventions and eco-friendly vehicle builds. He even dabbled in electric conversions, hinting at where he believed the future of motoring lay, not in nostalgia, but in innovation with integrity. And yet, through all of it, there was always a subtle undercurrent. Fans couldn't help comparing this solo chapter to The Post, Ed's seasons of Wheeler Dealers, where one leaned into depth and substance, the other leaned hard into style and speed. Ed never looked back with bitterness, but everything he built post-Wheeler Dealers was a quiet rebellion, a living rebuttal to the direction the show had taken. He wasn't out to compete. He was out to reclaim the soul of something he had once helped shape. Mike moves on, but the shadow remains. Mike Brewer did what professionals do. He kept the wheels turning. After Ed's exit, Wheeler Dealers rolled ahead with a new co-host, Ant Enstead. Later came Mark Elvis Priestley. Each brought their own energy and style. The show evolved, with new formats, upgraded visuals, and broader appeal. From California to Coventry, the engines kept revving. But no matter how well the show performed, and by most metrics, it still thrived, there was one thing it couldn't shake: the ghost of the Ed era. Comment sections on every upload would circle back. Ed would have done it better. Remember when they actually showed the full repair? Still miss the old days. Social media threads dissected differences in approach. YouTube comparisons popped up with titles like Then Versus, Now, and Why Ed China Was Irreplaceable. It wasn't personal, it was emotional. Fans weren't just missing a presenter. They were missing a feeling, the quiet satisfaction of watching something complicated made understandable. The humility, the unpolished charm. Mike tried to address the elephant in the room a few times. He defended the new direction, praised his co-hosts, and reminded viewers that change was inevitable in television. But every now and then, the old defensiveness crept in, because no matter how much he evolved the show, comparisons to Ed were baked into the brand's DNA. Even years later, Wheeler Dealers carried that shadow. It functioned, it entertained, but to many, it never quite felt whole again. And that was a paradox. Ed left, but in a way, he never really did. Do you think Ed China made the right choice in leaving the show? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.